Calves seem to be the thing that sticks out in a lot of people's minds of bodybuilders that just had ridiculous looking body parts. I mean, Platts had the greatest legs of all time, and I say that, crying because, I know I had good legs. They were not as good as Tom Platz's. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
The best way to control carpal tunnel with GH use. I respond differently to pharmaceutical brands, Pfizer, Merck, Sinotropin, etc. Currently using 6 IU 4 days a week and 2 IU 3 days a week. I know I can lower the dose, but my hands are numb during the day.
Yeah, he said it. He really did say it. The problem is that you're taking too much. And sometimes that happens when you just start out too high. A lot of times if you ramp up slowly over the course of several weeks, it doesn't happen as badly. And I think it's because when you hold an enormous amount of water really quickly, it's like your body can't adapt to it. And so it pinches off those nerves in the wrist here, and then your hands get numb. And obviously, if it's not, it's one thing if you just, sometimes you fall asleep on your hand and you wake up, it's numb and then it goes away. But if it's there all the time, it's very annoying. So my suggestion is stop the GH for like 2 days. Probably the carpal tunnel pins and needle feeling will go away. Start up at 2 IUs per day. If you tolerate that, go up to 4 IUs. And then if you tolerate that, you can back it up to 6. I don't think you need to take 6 if you have real serous stim, or I think you had mentioned you had pharmaceutical GH. You probably can stick with 4. If you can get up to 6 without the tingling and you want to do that, that's fine. But really 4 is probably more than sufficient. I felt that was the sweet spot when I did it. If I would do more than 4, I would get super, super bloated, and I just didn't feel any better. I felt worse, actually. So try 4, but back it down first. It happens to a lot of people. When I used to take GH, that never happened to me. I used to get my wisdom teeth used to move around, and they used to hurt. And I actually had to have one tooth pulled out like 6 weeks before a show, and I had another one done the following year around the same time. So my bottom ones are out. My bottom ones are out. My top ones are still there. They never came through, but that's definitely something that can certainly happen. So wisdom teeth, sometimes some elbow pain or joint pain, and very commonly the tingling of the hands.
Yohimbe for fat loss, your thoughts?
Back in the day, Dan Duchesne had this theory that, Yohimbe is an alpha-2 antagonist. Receptor antagonist. Now, normally we think of beta receptors when we talk about the blood vessels, right? Beta 1 receptors make the heart beat faster if you stimulate them. If you block them, you take a beta blocker, it slows your heart down. Beta 2 receptors open up the airways and the blood vessels. Beta 3 receptors theoretically stimulate fat burning. So, clenbuterol, which is a beta 2, beta 3 agonist, causes fat loss. When we talk about alpha receptors, they work a little differently. When you block alpha-2 receptors, which are found predominantly, by the way, in estrogen-dependent fat cell areas. So estrogen-dependent fat cells have a lot of alpha-2 receptors on them. When you block them, it does the opposite of what you would think. When you block alpha-2 receptors, you increase norepinephrine or adrenaline release in those nerve terminals, and it can mobilize fat, theoretically, in theory. Whether it works or not, so Dan Duchesne's theory was if you could inject Yohimbe directly, or Siri found something for me. If you can inject Yohimbe in injection form into fat-resistant areas, that would be, especially for women, like cellulite, he theorized that it would cause fat loss. they did come out with a couple people came out with some injectable Yohimbe things, and I just didn't see that happening. But theoretically, that's how it would burn fat, only in estrogen-dependent fat cells. Now, does it work? I don't know. Do people take oral Yohimbe all the time? I would stop at 2 weeks out, because what Yohimbe does do is it increases the presence of a hormone known as antidiuretic hormone, of vasopressin, and that hormone, same name, different name, same hormone, which is produced from your pituitary gland, can cause fluid retention. So Yohimbe induces fluid retention via that pathway. So you don't want to take Yohimbe 2 weeks out from a show. So you stop it. Personally, I don't think it really burns fat. Back in the day, before there was Viagra and Cialis, a lot of guys used Yohimbe because they said it was an aphrodisiac. Don't know if it ever worked that well. Certainly didn't work as well as Viagra and Cialis did. And then there was speculation for a while that taking Yohimbe would actually increase testosterone output. And I think that was a misnomer, because I think people were using it as as like kind of like a Viagra-like drug. So people just assumed that it was because it was increasing testosterone. Didn't really do that. So it's had a lot of different uses. Some people use alpha Yohimbe although it might be banned now, in pre-workouts, and it actually mentally stimulates you a little bit when you combine it with caffeine. So there's different versions, but either way, whatever Yohimbe you might be using, stop it at 2 weeks out. Now, these two questions were from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. That's my app. It's $29 a month. You download it from Android or iTunes store, and you get me as your coach in the back pocket, essentially. I answer all your questions in an open forum in the app, so everyone sees everyone's questions and answers. All my videos, all my articles I've ever written, all in one place. We put up a workout every week. I do a special Q&A video, just like Ask Dave here, except you get an extra one every week in the app for the app members. And, it's very, a lot of people love the app. The membership has grown exponentially, over the years. And I want to thank everyone for supporting it. Like I said, for $29 a month, you get me as your coach.
Your thoughts on the new research out that your body can utilize 100 grams of whey protein post-workout? It has always been said that you couldn't.
Well, here's where I think people don't understand. First of all, these studies that do these things where they give a big bolus, 100-gram protein, they don't really tell you what else these people are eating. So a lot of times they don't eat anything else. They eat nothing. They work out. They'll give them 100 grams of protein, and then they see what it does. Well, if you're protein starved, it's going to obviously use a lot more protein than if you're not protein starved. If you were eating every 3 hours and you get to your fifth meal of the day and you eat 100 grams of protein, will you absorb 100 grams of protein? 100%. You absorb everything you eat. Will you utilize the 100 grams of protein for building and repairing muscle? Absolutely not. Okay. Will the 400-pound strongman use 100 grams of protein? He might. He's going to use a lot more of it than the 120-pound woman would. So no matter how much protein you eat, you will absorb it. What your body does with it once it gets into the bloodstream is a different story. If your body needs it because you have an enormous amount of muscle mass on your body and you need a lot of protein to repair it, it will use a larger percentage. If you're smaller and you don't have as much muscle and all the muscle has enough amino acids already, and remember, your body can't store protein. There's no storage for protein. So what does it do? It converts it into carbs. It'll burn it up for energy. It'll do something with it, And so you always can absorb whatever you eat. It's whether you utilize it or not. So if you could always create a scenario whereby your body is protein deficient enough that you're going to absorb a larger bolus amount and utilize it for building muscle, or repairing muscle tissue or enzymes, hair, nails, skin. Remember, everything in the body uses protein to repair itself. So depending on the need for the body, that will dictate how much you use. But would you rather eat 6 small meals throughout the day so you assimilate those meals and use every ounce of that protein for building and repairing muscle? Or would you rather risk it and say, you know what, I'll just eat it all in the morning and hope that my body utilizes it the whole day? Well, I got news for you. By the end of the day, that protein is going to either be done and metabolized or turned into energy or gotten rid of, and you're going to have not enough protein later in the day. So the answer to the question is that the most efficient way to grow muscle, and we figured this out, Arnold figured it out, back before them, is to eat frequent small meals throughout the day of protein, throughout the day that you're awake, and not to go large stretches of time without it, and not to try to overeat protein because you missed a meal earlier. The worst thing you can do is miss a feeding because of the fact that your body can't store protein. It can store fat, save it for later. It can store glucose, carbs, as glycogen in the liver and the muscles and use it for later. Can't do that with protein. And that's why we must split up our meals and eat small, frequent meals. And that's the reality. You can create any kind of crazy concoct a study. It doesn't mean that that's a better way of doing things. But what do I know? I'm an old guy from the 80s. I haven't changed my theories in years.
The most insane body part that you've ever seen, was it Matarazzo's calves? Were there any bodybuilders who absolutely blew your mind when you met them in person in shape?
You know who had really freaky calves? Eric Fankhauser. I don't know if you remember Eric Fankhauser. He had the craziest, freakiest calves of all time, probably. But Dorian had some crazy calves, really crazy calves, believe it or not. Calves seem to be the thing that sticks out in a lot of people's minds of bodybuilders that just had ridiculous-looking body parts. I mean, Platz had the greatest legs of all time, and I say that, crying because, I know I had good legs. They were not as good as Tom Platz's. So there was guys with some seriously freaky arms. I mean, Ronnie Coleman had 24-inch arms. I mean, they were pretty impressive. Lee Priest has some fucking crazy ass arms. If you ever saw him in person, I'm talking when he was young, they were just outrageous. So there were people with crazy body parts over the years. I mean, Joel Stubbs had probably the best back of all time. It was like it's funny because he was an airline pilot. He looked like an airplane from behind. He had a bigger back than Ronnie did, but he had torn his quads like earlier in his life, so his legs were just never as good as his upper body. But he had the sickest back I've ever seen. It was crazy. I mean, Dorian's back in person was pretty outrageous too. I got to tell you, I saw him in the gym training, and the slabs of beef that was on that back is crazy. Kai Green's back is pretty absolutely wacky, over the top. Kai's glutes, as Bleckman would say, were pretty insane too. And Ronnie had some insane glutes when he was in shape. So there were a lot of people with freaky body parts, over the years that I've seen. For some reason, everyone remembers calves. I don't know why. Calves just seem to be like this body part that sticks out, because I think a lot of people don't have them. Matarazzo's calves were freaky, but I think Eric Fankhauser's were better. And I think that Nasser had pretty good calves. Nasser got mad at me. I didn't know this. He was mad at me for about 6 months because I had told our friend Josh Friedman, who was friends with him, that when I saw Nasser, when I saw Nasser, I broke his balls. I said, "Do you put synthol in your calves?" He likes to ask like sarcastic questions like that to me. And he was insulted. But I didn't know he was insulted. He goes, "No, these are my real calves." And so he told my friend Josh that he was mad at me. And I said, "Why is he mad at me?" Because you told him, you asked him if he put synthol in his calves. I said, "That's a compliment. If he doesn't put synthol in his calves," I said, then that was the best compliment he ever received. I said, and he forgave me for that. And then he didn't like something else I said, obviously. But the point is that he had some really big freaky calves. They weren't like long, but they came out. They were like fucking like about 6 inches wide. So there have been some impressive guys over the years.